year, one beer, one kid, one gun, one fight, that fatal one night that would make dad run. I often ask, did I play a role in that outcome? And if I did as a kid, I often ask, how come? We're from living in the Bay to the Roxbury slums, where I shot my first jumper and saw my first jump, standing on the corner chewing on rocks like gum.
The next topic we're going to discuss on Boxing Bros is Canelo Alvarez. It looks like Canelo Alvarez and his team have targeted an opponent, and that opponent is Callum Smith. According to Boxing News 24, Callum Smith was offered $5 million to face Canelo Alvarez. If you recall, Canelo Alvarez signed an 11-fight deal with DAZN that averaged out to about $33 million a fight, basically over $33 million a fight. And so, according to an article for ESPN, DAZN is holding up plans for the next Canelo fight. It says Canelo Alvarez plans to fight on September 12th. Could be scuttled if he and DAZN do not come to terms on their next fight, according to his lawyer. Promoter Eddie Hearn has said the WBA super middleweight champion Callum Smith is the leading contender to face Alvarez in the fall. However, multiple sources told ESPN that DAZN is asking for a steep discount from Alvarez for this particular fight, which is keeping the matchup from being finalized. So, after hearing that Callum Smith has been or is the leading candidate, are you satisfied with that fight? And also, what's your thoughts on DAZN asking Canelo Alvarez to take a steep pay cut? I'll start tuning off with G.
Yeah, I am excited for this fight, and I'm actually shocked. But then when I think about it, I'm not surprised, right? Callum got a belt, and he's a good name, but the reason why I think it makes sense on Canelo's end is because he's offering the fight to him last minute, even though he did offer him a fight, I think, like a couple months ago, and Smith's side, I guess they turned it down, expecting more pay. Even this offer, I think they actually counted with like they want $6 million as opposed to $5 million. But I'm like, well, that's just $1 million. You know what I mean? I'm talking like I'm a millionaire. But like, yeah, $1 million difference. So I think that fight could happen. But
hey, you're talking like someone I know. My dad gave me a small loan of $1 million. Go ahead.
What you would call it? But I have to be fair and be like, you know what? I could see and I understand where DAZN's coming from. Times is hard right now, and to still have to honor that agreement with Canelo, it financially just doesn't make sense for the company. So I think Canelo should play team ball and, like just take some, like maybe like, all right, yo, pay me a little less. Like instead of $30 million, pay me $25 million or something to allow them to at least make somewhat of a profit or at least break even from this fight. Because I think when they made this, no one anticipated, like this pandemic, right? So I'm saying pretty much I understand where DAZN is coming from. And so Canelo, you should play ball a little bit, like, because I don't like think about. Let's just say he leaves DAZN. ESPN ain't gonna pay that money. You know what I'm saying? And then if he goes to PBC's gonna be like, all right, let's do a pay-per-view. You're not gonna make that type of bread right now. Like right now, a lot of people are still unemployed. A lot of boxing fans aren't necessarily willing to pay $70 to watch a fight like that. So what network is willing to take that type of investment? So I just kind of feel like Canelo, just play ball like all the other fighters right now. Everyone's taking pay cuts. Like, I agree you're a superstar, but that doesn't mean you're bigger than boxing right now. So I don't know. I actually agree with DAZN on this one. I wouldn't make the fight if I feel like it's gonna be a detriment to the company.
All right, Complex.
In terms of the fight itself, it's a good fight. It's a real good fight. It looks like Canelo is moving up to super middleweight or kind of in that area. I don't know if he's ever going to go back down to middleweight. It looks like he wants to stay up at super middleweight to light heavyweight, which is cool. Callum Smith is technically, I believe, is the ring champion at 168. After he won the World Boxing Series, I believe he actually was awarded the Ring Magazine belt, even though he only has one belt. So it's a good fight. It's a good fight. It's a little short notice, but it's still two top 168 fighters, and I would love to see that fight. On DAZN or whatever. Honestly, it's a really good challenge for Canelo.
That's definitely the battle of left hooks right there.
You said what?
That's gonna be left hooks to the body. You know what I mean? Callum
Smith's no joke. And honestly, there's a lot of good super middleweights. I mean, David Benavidez, really good fighter. Caleb Plant, another good fighter. There's a lot of good fighters at super middleweight. So if Canelo's gonna stay at that weight class and mix it up, that'd be really dope to see. But in terms of DAZN and the money issue, the thing that stuck out to me in that article was a steep discount, meaning they want him to take a real pay cut. When Canelo came out, they said it's the biggest sport deal in sports history at that time. He was getting $30 million a fight for 11 fights, was guaranteed like $300 million some, right? As a sports contract. And DAZN, I've said it from the beginning, I love DAZN in theory. I love DAZN, hey, $10 a month, I'll take it. But in practice, they've bungled this whole thing. They've wasted their money. Eddie Hearn and Canelo and Golden Boy have wasted all their money. They got a blank check, or not really blank, was $1 billion check from this Ukrainian billionaire so they can make the streaming service. But they've spent so much money. Now they're hurting. Now when things are hard, there's a saying in investing from Warren Buffett: when the tide comes back, you can see who's been swimming naked. Mm-hmm. This was a bad idea from the jump. You're paying $30 million. You're paying Canelo $30 million a fight, guaranteed, no matter who he fights. Yet you don't have that much control over who he fights. Now they're trying to apply pressure and be like, no, we're controlling who you fight, and we want to now also control the money, because we can't even offset the losses we're taking by the gate that at least that we were gonna get. Now the fight, if it's gonna happen, is gonna be in a closed arena, no fans, no gate money, no nothing. So that's another issue. That's why they're hurting. You can see who's hurting right now. DAZN, in theory, makes sense. $10 a month, that's great, but they've been blowing through a lot of money. And honestly, I was saying to Caden the other day, I'm thinking about canceling my DAZN subscription, even though they do put on good fights. But in the last few months, they haven't had anything. They have a few lineup fights coming up, but it's nothing to me that it's like, why am I still paying $10 a month? I definitely wouldn't pay $20. The only reason I kept it was because I still had $10 a month, and I was like, I'm grandfathered in. But I definitely wouldn't pay $20 a month. You know what I mean? And then the next big fight is what? I don't really know. Even if Canelo and Callum Smith happens, that'd be great. But then in the last months, how many big fights have they had? But I'm committing $10 a month to you guys for what, really? It just doesn't seem like it makes sense. When I could pick and choose fights I want to watch on a basis if I felt like it, you know what I mean? But, and they're paying top-notch dollar, but they're not getting pay-per-view revenue. The reason why pay-per-view is the business model is because that's where they maximize the most money to pay these guys 20, 30, 40 million a fight. You can't just do that off of streaming. You look at Showtime. Showtime is a subscription service as well, but when they have to give those mega fights, they have to go to pay-per-view because you can't just come up with the money. So honestly, DAZN, if it's around in a year, that would be great, but I'd be surprised. I think the DAZN experiment is gonna come and go. In terms of the overall landscape of their business product, I just don't see what they have coming up that's gonna save it. They have a few big name marquee fighters, but you have Canelo and Triple G is supposed to be your big fight. They've been on your platform for how many years? You can't even cash in on that. So you've been paying these guys how much? You guarantee Triple G like $30 million a fight too, or $25 million. It's just all over the place in terms of the money they're spending. I'm glad the boxers get paid, making good money, but really for a business, it just wasn't going to make sense in the long run. So I think that's more of like a, bells are ringing for DAZN when you look at them in terms of the business model. They're asking now for steep discounts. So who knows? And Canelo's like, look, you guys, I have a contract for $30 million a fight. You guys got to pay it to me. And he's contractually obligated. Some guys are taking pay cuts now. We've seen, even in MMA, guys have been asking for more money, but they're like, look, we can't give you any more money because there's no gate. but we'll give you what's contracted to you. And then if you make money on the pay-per-view, you make it. But in this case, it's DAZN. They're trying to get off subscription. And I bet people have been canceling or pausing their subscriptions. And, I mean, I'm waiting to see. I'm hoping to see a big fight coming up. If not, I might cancel too. But it's a good fight. I mean, Callum Smith, they're trying to argue for $1 million. Like, do y'all want to see the fight or not? You know, you're in the grand scheme of, if you think 30 million, 35 million to Canelo, you mean you can take one of those and give it to Callum to make him happy? This is supposed to be a mega fight. 6 million is not absurd to ask, you know what I mean? In the grand scheme of fights that have happened, 6 million is not too much. So it's weird that they're holding up a fight, and you guys are getting knocked off on your own date by freaking Mike Tyson. So it's great.
It's bad luck.
Sorry, there's a train just went by my house, so I had to mute real quick. But that was my point. I just want to wrap up with that. Is that you guys are going to get knocked off your date by Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. You know, so DAZN, you're bungling this whole thing. You know, you're supposed to have the big star in the sport, but you guys are struggling with money, struggling with your streams and your subscriptions. They need to figure this out fast.
Yeah, I think it is very interesting to see DAZN in this position. I think originally when the platform came out, they needed to steal fighters. And what I mean by they needed to steal fighters were they were new to the scene and they needed to gather like American talent. And so one of the ways they did that was that they had to overpay people. And we're mentioning like Canelo and Triple G, and they're overpaid, but they overpaid people like Tevin Farmer, Demetrius Andrade. They overpaid so many people that they didn't necessarily have to overpay because they needed a roster. And then you see, I can't even name the two guys Demetrius Andrade fight. And this is no slight at Demetrius Andrade because I think he's a very talented fighter, and I think he'll hold his own against anybody in his division, without a doubt. He has a chance to beat anyone in his division. But his last two fights were guys I don't even remember. I don't even know. I know one was in the Garden and the other was in Rhode Island.
They be shipping in dudes from Africa. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was crazy, bro. I mean, like,
Demetrius fought that Polish kid, that Polish dude who fought Danny Jacobs. I'm blanking on his name, but that's who he fought in Rhode Island.
He's fighting. Yeah, they're shipping in dudes from like Europe and Africa to fight him, and it's like, fam, we got so many stars here in the United States that he could fight. Even like mediocre names he could be fighting right now, but they're like shipping in nobodies to fight, and it's just like, oh, come on, this got to stop. And I know we're gonna talk about homegirl who got beat up, the soccer mom that got knocked out. It's like, yo, that's DAZN's whole MO. Like, put a killer with a non-killer, and then they think they can sell that. That's why I kind of agree with Complex. Like, this model something got to give, man. Yo, my bad for overspeed.
No, that's fine. I think, open-ended discussion is needed at times. But, but just get back to the point, like you guys are saying, I think you overpaid these fighters, but then you're putting them in fights where the opponent's overmatched. Mm-hmm. So that's also hurting your ratings and everything. You think like their name is just enough for people to want to see the fight? No, you actually have to put out a good product. And I'm not saying that DAZN doesn't do that. What DAZN does very well is they'll stack a card with big names fighting inferior talent. Mm-hmm. So you'll get to see Tevin Farmer, Katie Taylor, Demetrius Andrade all fight an inferior opponent. And that's like their thing. But you're not going to last on that. The other thing is get the bang for your buck. If I'm a fighter and you're paying me $5 million to fight some dude you just found walking the street in Africa, right? How much money you think I'm going to want you to pay me to fight Charlo?
Yeah.
Right? You just found someone looking for relief in Puerto Rico and brought them over here so that they can fight Katie Taylor, right? How much money you think that she's going to want to fight like a real threat? And so actually what you're doing is you're hurting yourself. See, Canelo is feeling like I deserve all this money for all these fights because you paid him $30 million to fight. What was his name? Rocky, whatever his name was, Fielding or whatever. You paid him $30 million to fight that guy. And you paid him $30 million to fight Danny Jacobs. There's levels to this. One of these guys is not like the other, right? But you still paid him $30 million nonetheless, right? So when you were making that contract, why didn't you name the fights? And this is what people have to start doing. And even an idea, just a thought, and I think it's starting to happen. Learn from Eddie Hearn, from Frank Warren. I think this is in Bob Arum. This is the start of something nice. When you're going to have a fight that involves cross promotion, start negotiating the fight early. You know it's a possibility, right? So get the contracts out early. Start negotiating the fight early. There's a way both of you can win. Instead of Deontay Wilder having to fight Luis Ortiz for a second time to make some bread, and just whatever, you could actually set up a cross event where he can make 3 times that amount. So could you, and the other team could make more money than they would make fighting some easy fight as well. And the public would be into it. Just negotiate it. Put it in the contract. Put it in there. Make it work. The biggest problem is for DAZN, they had to overpay to get a roster. But it's like now you have the roster, but these guys are used to making money for fighting nobody. And it's your fault.
Yeah, and another thing too, which is what I'm gonna come to DAZN's defense on this. Because although Callum Smith is a good name for Canelo, you're only giving DAZN 1 month to promote this fight. You know, and so it's gonna be really hard for them to make anything off of this fight. So that's why it sucks, man. Like, and shout out to Canelo, man. Get your coins because you got them locked in on a contract. But what's to stop DAZN? Not saying they will do this, but what's to stop them from just freezing them out, saying like, all right, well,
they don't need to. They don't need to. They're gonna make the argument that I made before. They're gonna make the argument that when at the time they signed the contract, they relied on the gate, they relied on selling merchandise, they relied on being able to promote the fight in advance, they relied on so many things that aren't available to them. So now it will be to their detriment to pay him the money that they originally signed for, because at the time they were counting on certain things that they no longer have access to. So it's a legitimate argument. And I think the courts will hear it and say, yeah, you're going to have to postpone your fight until they can, you know, be in a good position to pay you all that revenue. So what Canelo was saying is true. I want to fight on Mexican Independence Day. I have a contract. I want to get paid what I'm supposed to get paid. But they have a legitimate argument, which is an unforeseeable circumstance came by no fault of us or, you know, DAZN, of anyone, and made it impossible for us to generate maximum revenue for this fight to be able to pay you.
But the thing is, Caden, is that, you know, they should have put that in the contract. I believe there's usually a clause, I believe it's called force majeure, where if something out of the ordinary happens, out of your control, that this is what happens next. If they didn't clearly state that, then technically he still is due that money. I mean, they do have an argument. Any promoter right now, any business right now can make an argument like, look, we can't pay you the same money because of whatever. But do you want to spend time fighting in court, or do you want to put your product out there to make you money? If they're fighting with Canelo in court, that means they don't have a big fight. So what do they have in September that's going to put up anything that people are going to be like, yeah, let me keep my subscription? So they need Canelo right now more than he might need them. I mean, Canelo's got money. Canelo, if you want to make him wait, he'll wait. Whatever, you owe him that money. But fighting in court's not going to help. You know,
it's not about it helping, and you're right. You can have a direct provision in a contract that says something, but then they're just the law in the way that it's set up. Things that are so there are, for example, defenses and exceptions that you don't need to write in, or that exist even if you don't write it in. So you know, I get what you're saying. If there's that provision in the contract, well then fine. But there's also the realistic change of circumstance that no one could foresee at the time they entered into that contract. And to force someone into that contract would be wrong. So, for example, take a prenup. Even if you have a prenup today July 2020, and then the prenup, it says like no alimony, no this, no that. You get divorced in 2040, and over those 20 years, you became a millionaire. You got so much land, and you were able to accrue all that because your wife was a stay-home mom.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go get a divorce in 2020 and say, well, we got a prenup in 2020 that says no alimony, she gets nothing, whatever. The judge is going to be like, at the time she signed this, you had no money, you had no this, you had no that. There was a change of circumstance that allowed you to become a millionaire, and she was a stay-home wife, blah, blah, blah. So it's not just when you sign the contract, but at the time of enforcing the contract, it still has to be fair and equal. So although you have a prenup that says no alimony, 20 years from now, the judge may say, their circumstances have changed, and now there should be alimony, so I'm not going to honor it. So that has to be, the contract has to be fair at the time it needs to be executed as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I get what the argument, and look, DAZN is in a really tough spot. Honestly, they're in this position now because of what they did in the past. This is the argument I was trying to make back when we were talking about Demetrius Andrade fighting Canelo. I wasn't saying that like, oh, Canelo's scared of Andrade, or that, Andrade is the most deserving fighter. But I was like, look, if you're going to be paying Andrade $5 million to fight, why don't you pay him $5 million to fight Canelo? It doesn't make sense to have him against overmatched opponents and you have Canelo out there, or have him fight Triple G. You guys, at the one point, they had all the major belts at middleweight, and they bungled it. They wasted it. They could have had a unified champion at middleweight, had all the guys fight, and then have a one champion. But instead, they let Demetrius Andrade fight nobodies, Canelo fight whoever, Triple G fight whoever, and now look at them. Now when they need the money, you guys didn't do anything to build up like a marquee, you know what I mean? Like build up something, and now you're hurting. You know what I mean? You would have made money if you put those fights on earlier, because those have been marquee fights that would have drew more fans to the sport. I want to make a quick analogy before I wrap up. Is in MMA. I'm a big MMA fan, and throughout the history of MMA, there've been a lot of different promotions. The UFC, the biggest one, but there was one promotion or two actually really that came through. One was called Elite XC, and it was actually headed up by Gary Shaw. You remember the old boxing promoter? He tried to step into the MMA game, and he came in with a splash. He had a network deal with CBS. He was throwing money around, trying to sign fighters. They put on all this stuff. Kimbo was their biggest name, and they put all their money behind Kimbo. Then Kimbo got knocked out by nobody. The whole thing folded like a cheap folding chair. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just, my point is this, you can't just hop into this business with money thinking that you're going to take over. Like, I'm going to just come in with a big splash and just overspend and get you out of here. It doesn't work that way. At the end of the day, quality and good matchups, giving the fans quality product is what's going to keep them. Not just, oh, I got this name here and I got this name here and da-da-da-da-da. Like, you can't win. You can't succeed in business in a long time doing that. So DAZN really messed up from the jump street. I could see it. They came in with a lot of money, a lot of splash, whatever. But I'm like, yo, when the money runs out, which it will, things are going to fall apart if you're not putting these guys in good fights. Devin Haney got $1 million to fight whoever with his emailed WBC belt. Like, you're paying the guy $1 million to fight a nobody for a belt he won, he got gifted. You know what I mean? And no slight to Devin Haney, but it is what it is. So DAZN is all over the place. They need to really take a step back and restructure their business in a way that's going to help them succeed in the long term, or else they won't be around in another year.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said, but I don't want to single DAZN out. I think a lot of the boxing companies that are out there, from Top Rank, PBC, Showtime Boxing, seems to have gotten it. Their lineup is looking lovely. You have to put out better quality fights, and if you don't put out better quality fights, like this stuff Top Rank's putting out on ESPN is just pure garbage. You're gonna be in big time trouble. But the pandemic has hit every promoter and every network hard. But when you have a streaming service that relies on subscriptions and you're not able to put on fights, it's going to hit you the hardest. And so I think, like you said, you've had months of paying $10.99 and not getting any fights. So what are you paying $10.99 for? I think DAZN may be even a bigger hit, but they may want to consider crediting people who pay that money to stay so they don't cancel a subscription, and then announce a lineup of good fights that will make people stay. That would be one thing. The other thing they should do is they need to find a partner. What I mean by that is they need to find like a channel that replays their fights on Saturdays. Like, for example, if it's Showtime pay-per-view, right? You watch it live if you pay for it. If not, you watch it the following Saturday on Showtime. Where does Joshua Ruiz get played? On TV. Where does Joshua Ruiz 2 get played on TV? The following Saturday. Do you know how good Joshua Ruiz 1 was? Shocked the nation. But what channel was able to play that? They need a channel that can play their fights on the following Saturday. So that way there'll be more exposure. They need to do a little more digging. They need a partner on a live channel where they can put the fights on like a week behind and things of that nature. They're relying too much on the internet, the streaming, and in the young generation, and they're forgetting a lot of boxing fans are the older generation that just want to turn on a channel, that believe a gentleman's fight doesn't involve kicking. Like, they're forgetting that. Like, for example, you go to my dad and all this stuff is streaming. The only way he's watching it is if I set it up for him. But he would love to watch every fight. So you also got to expand your mind and understand boxing is passed down from generation to generation from the older heads, but a lot of them older heads aren't downloading the app, doing this, going on YouTube.
What's that? What's an APP? You know what I'm saying?
They think you're telling them to get a job when you say get that app, like get the app. Like, well,
yeah, no, that's an excellent point too when you talked about partnering with a network, because then they could actually benefit off of commercial income. You know what I mean? Like, they could actually receive like all of those ads that are coming in while they're playing their card. You know what I mean? They're not getting that with the subscription, you know, so that actually makes sense, you know, like, and then maybe that could make up for a lot of their losses, you know. That I think that's an excellent point. Unfortunately, they can't do it with Fox. They have to do it with somebody else. PBC,
Fox is the only network there. That's my point.
ESPN got, you know, top rank, so they got to find something that could it's like a mutual benefit, you know. Even UFC
one that's still going to be PBC.
Yeah, but even UFC has one of them stations. Is it FX1? UFC got one of them. I know that.
Well, you got ESPN.
ESPN, ESPN, and the ESPN Plus app.
Yes. Oh, damn. Well, the zone got to figure this out, man. But
I guarantee you, there's a market, there's a place. Like, I know CBS is like a partner with whomever, but I mean, just because they got PBC doesn't mean CBS won't show the zone. They don't got no loyalty like that.
Yeah, and CBS also has their own little app now, a little subscription and everything. They could probably do a bundle thing like ESPN does with Disney Plus and Hulu. You know what I mean? You can get like Zone, CBS, and something else.
Try to get your stuff on Netflix. I don't know, partner with Netflix. If you get Disney Plus, right? You get Marvel, you get National Geographic,
Wars, all of that
stuff. Plus, partner with Netflix. So people get Netflix, they get the Zone at a cheaper rate, and then boom, all your fights are on Netflix. Do something.
Yeah, I saw the Box Bros, man, be giving y'all gems, man. Listen,
y'all need to hire us.
Eddie, you better give us a check. When you set that Netflix deal up, send us over a check, man.
Y'all already stole the Legends League from G, and you didn't give him a check. You stole legal arguments from me, and you didn't give me a check. Listen, man.
Make this happen, Eddie. We rocking with you for now.
You stole Wilder fan arguments that are ridiculous from Complex.
Oh, crazy. But, man, yeah, let us know what you think. Please like, share, subscribe, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all major platforms that display podcasts. It's the Boxing Bros.
I wanna see what's on your mind. You wanna see what's on my mind.